Hey friends, in this quick video, I'll teach you Alex Hormozi's closer sales script, which I was lucky enough to learn from a guy called Alex Beck that ran sales for Alex Hormozi over at Gym Launch and who went on to share the closer framework with me. Now, if you're not familiar with Alex Hormozi yet, he has a series of different businesses. He exited six of those for a cumulative sum of over $50 million. And right now he runs a company called acquisition.com, which basically helps startups to scale. And without further ado, let's jump into the closer sales script because I'm sure that's what you're here for. So first of all, the closer sales script is perfect for any high ticket B2C sales or B2B sales, regardless of industry. It works across brick and mortar equally as much as it works across the software space. So the closer structure is an acronym which basically stands for these six things that you can see on the screen right now. So C stands for clarifying why the lead is on the call. L stands for laying out the agenda. O stands for overviewing the current pain points. Then you go on to sell the vacation, or otherwise known as your product. And then you empathetically handle objections and reinforce the next steps. So without further ado, let me just break down the sections one by one. And then afterwards, we'll go into the magic words that would help you a lot with actually setting out this structure. So to start with, when you clarify why the lead is on the call, you want to really achieve two things. First of all, really understand the reason why they showed up, what sparked their interest, what got their attention in the messaging, what resonates, and that would then help you to actually craft better messaging later down the line and better understand what your ideal clients, why they're on these type of calls, and then you can get better at the messaging front. And then secondly, you would understand what the lead expects to know by the end of the call, because if you have those two things in mind, you'll be better off than otherwise, just jumping straight for the pitch as most desperate salespeople do. Now, secondly, you'll then lay out the agenda. When you lay out the agenda, you tell the lead what this call will be all about, and you will structure it. Now, the reason for that, we'll go into more details a bit further down the line, but you really want to be the person that navigates and really sets the direction for the call, and you really want to be in control of the agenda. So that's why you would lay it out. So that could be as simple as saying, hey, we'll start with introductions. I will then ask you a few questions just to better understand your needs. And then you can tell me, which ones, like I'll tell you a bit about our products and you can tell me which one resonates the most, for example. Then thirdly, you will overview the current pain points, which is, in other words, just better understanding what the challenge is and, what they've tried in the past, why it hasn't worked. And once again, by uncovering the pain points, you can then sell the solution because there is no point in selling a solution to a non-problem, right? And then afterwards, you'll sell the vacation, and this will be a smooth transition before that to actually sell the solution that you're selling. So in this case, you will switch from being the typical salesperson that just pitches the product and says, oh, hey, yeah, we have this cool software tool which helps you to do X and Y. Instead of saying all of that, you would switch to another narrative, which is storytelling and saying, oh, Mark, speaking to you today actually reminds me of a similar client who was from your niche. They were struggling with X and Y, and we found that this solution helped them a lot, and this resulted in this specific result, right? So that will be a lot more empathetic than just jumping and pitching the products as if we haven't listened to their pain points beforehand. Afterwards, we'll empathetically handle objections. Once again, I'll do a separate video on how to uncover pain points and how to handle objections, because that in itself is an art. And I think, once again, there are some other scripts that we can provide for those two topics. And then finally, at the end of the call, you would reinforce the next steps. And that's something that a lot of sales reps get wrong. So a lot of the time, it's as simple as just sharing more information. And if you just do that, the chances are the lead will ghost you forever because realistically, you haven't really added enough value. You haven't driven the urgency. And, that's not good enough. So we'll talk about how to reinforce the next steps. And then set a follow-up date and then thank them for their time and basically hang up, right? So without further ado, let's jump into it. The first part, that's the one part that I can't really help you with too much, but any call starts with small talk. The key thing here is not to mistake this for building rapport. And hence, it's just about, just saying, hey, how's it going? How has this month been for you? Or in my opinion, the best kind of questions come from research. So if you look at their LinkedIn profile and you know that they're into football, if they're into like some sort of hobby, or if they worked in a past company before, you could say, oh, hey, saw you worked at this company before. Curious, like, what was it like there? I have a couple of friends that used to work there before, for example, right? And that will make you stand out from all the desperate salespeople out there that just ask about the weather or like, how is it going? Those are generic questions that you wouldn't really remember. So that's the small talk. Now, as soon as you can feel that they're ready to actually jump into the agenda for the call, jump into the next part. And this is where the spicy part of the script starts, right? So you were clarifying why they're there. like you're tasked with asking a couple of these questions. Obviously, don't just read them one by one because they'll be super robotic. So I would recommend saying, hey, what sparked your interest in this call? Uh, Specifically from the messaging that we sent across. Why are you here? Why did you take time for the call? What is the problem we're trying to solve? And why is that important to you? Now, if you ask a couple of these questions, I absolutely guarantee you that they will tell you specifically the kind of agenda that they want to cover and the kind of things that stood out from your messaging. And straight away, you can make a note of that because that will be your unique selling point compared to whatever other providers they're looking at. Because if they say, oh, hey, I like the AI element, for example, you may want to double down on that throughout the sales pitch later down the line. Now, a lot of the time, the thing that salespeople get wrong is at this point here, the lead says, oh, we don't have a problem or we don't have a reason for the call. We were just curious to check out your solution. At this point, a lot of sales reps just let go and they move to the next part. And that's the biggest mistake you can make because instead, here's what you need to do. You need to scan for pain. So you would say, oh, right. Okay, Mark, gotcha. Typically, we find that, let's say, finance directors like yourself jump on these type of calls because of two things. First of all, they're fed up of high shipping costs. Secondly, they're tired of not having tracking for their operations team to know where the shippings are throughout. Now, is that relatable? And once again, what you're trying to do here is you're trying to scan for pain. So you're saying, oh, hey, your persona typically cares about two things. Those are two pain points that conveniently we solve. Now, either of those two things relatable. And then if they say no, you would say, oh, right, cool. In that case, just curious, how do you manage the current logistics fulfillment process without, relying on parallel market exchange rates, for example, right? Let's say if you're selling like a logistics service. And straight away, you're going to dig deeper into the pain points that this person is facing. And guess what? If they have none of these pain points that you're talking about here, you don't need to jump on this call with them because quite frankly, you can't add value to the business. So straight away over here, if they can't clarify why they're on the call, if I were you, just try and scan for pain points because once again, you need to have this doctor's mindset of scanning for pain points, prescribing a solution only after you find out the pain points, and then you need to diagnose them throughout as well, right? So that's the first part, which is clarifying why the person is on the call. Next up, we have laying out the agenda, and this is probably the most straightforward part of the call. So you would say, okay, cool. Now, to make this call worth your time, what do you want us to make sure that we cover today? Straight away, you will make a note of whatever they say here, because once again, you want to live up to the expectations. In fact, you probably want to exceed them, right? So that's the first thing. Secondly, you will say, okay, cool. Of course, we can cover that. Mind if I ask you a few questions before, just to understand your current way of doing things to do with this process that we're selling, that our solution solves? At that point, they'll give you the probably like permission to ask a few questions. And then you would transition to this phrase, which is really important. So in this phrase, you say, hey, the goal for me is to learn more about your challenges with these two processes. So specifically, let's say logistics and fulfillment of orders. And by the end of the call, I want you to make a confident yes/no decision about trying this out on a free trial, or you mention whatever next step you want them to take coming out of the call, if this is a fit. Now at that point, you'll say, oh, Mark, does that sound interesting? Like, does that sound reasonable? And at that point, hopefully they'll say yes, because in most 99% of cases, they say yes because people are nice. And assuming that you answer all of their questions, they will have a confident yes/no decision by the end of the call. Now, as you can see over here, all of these words make sure that you're in control of the agenda. You sound a lot more professional by structuring the call, and you note down what they want to cover, because a lot of these sales calls go wrong simply because you're covering your agenda, but you're not covering the agenda of the person that you're speaking to. So once again, let's tick this off, laying out the agenda. We've talked about it. And next up, we'll talk about overviewing pain points. And specifically, overviewing pain points, in my opinion, once again, I like oversimplified frameworks, which typically tend to be acronyms. So over here, we'll talk about a spiced framework, which, if this sounds interesting to you, will have its own video on the YouTube channel. So specifically, we're going to look at 6 types of questions that we'll ask in order to overview the pain points. The first questions we'll ask are situational questions. How do you currently do the reporting process? Who's involved? How many hours do you spend on reporting? For example, if you're selling like a reporting software. Then after that, you'll dig deep into the pain. And here you want to really label some emotions. Oh, is this challenging? Are you struggling with this? Does that keep you up at night? Does this thing make your project managers anxious because they have little visibility? You really need to add some sort of emotional words to your vocabulary when you ask the pain point questions. Moving on from that, you'll talk about impact questions. Okay, cool. What happens if this isn't solved in the next 3 months? What would your job or life look like 6 months from now if nothing goes on, like nothing gets done to do this? And a lot of the time, you can imagine, let's say you're selling like a supplement, right? A lot of the time they'll be like, oh, I'll be probably morbidly obese. My wife will probably leave me, and I'll probably be depressed because I can't even go and play football, for example, because I can't even run, right? So straight away at that point, they will educate themselves and they'll probably think like, whoa, okay, I probably need this supplement after all, right? If you're selling like, I don't know, some sort of fat supplement, for example. Now, moving on, after that, you will try and identify the critical event. Now, a critical event is any catalyst, anything that can basically speed up the process for you to give them an opportunity to try your solution. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're selling a finance solution, so something like a payment gateway, and you know that they receive their highest orders during Black Friday and Cyber Monday. In that case, you will say, okay, when do you typically experience the highest amounts of payments coming in? They'll tell you those 2 dates, and you'll say, okay, so how do you plan on solving this? Like when does this need to be solved by? And they'll tell you, okay, by Cyber Monday or by Black Friday. And then straight away in your head, you have this timeline in mind because you know they need your solution, and for this pain point to be solved by that exact timeline. And this will drive the urgency, which is otherwise known as by identifying the critical event. Then finally, you'll talk about some decision questions, which is something as simple as, oh, last time you onboarded a provider similar to us, what was the process? And who else got involved apart from yourself in that decision? On top of that, you can ask some other questions, which are basically things like understanding the key purchase criteria, like what's important to you when you choose a provider to this specific problem. But more or less, all of these questions will be following the SPICE framework, so situational, pain point questions, impact questions, critical event, and decision questions. Now, this is the most important part that we're moving to now, which is selling the solution. This is where everyone goes wrong, and I really want you to get this right. So please bear with me here. First of all, we will forget about shamelessly plugging the useless product features like saying that it's AI driven or it has this cool feature, unless it's super specific to solving a pain point. And in most cases, rather than saying, oh, hey, we're this company that does X and Y, forget about it. No one cares. Like literally no one cares. You're not reading your website. And instead, here is what to do. Whenever you listen to their pain points, and whenever you have 2 or 3 pain points in mind already that you can solve for this specific lead, you would switch to this. Okay, cool, Mark. I understand. This reminds me of a similar client. And generally, they were struggling with this first thing that you mentioned, something very similar to it. In fact, they were struggling with the high shipping rates, and the transaction fees were very high given the different exchange rates. On top of that, and they were complaining about all of that, and it was causing them, their chief operations officer, sleepless nights. Not to mention there was lack of tracking and blah 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 blah. Right. So the first thing you do here is you empathize by saying this reminds me of. Then you explain their pain points and you label their pain points. And this goes back to like Chris Voss's principle of just labeling the emotions. And then you smoothly transition to how your solution played a part in that and how you then help them to achieve a desired goal. For example, oh, this lowered their shipping costs without having to, like completely break down their process from scratch. And all of this is super, super important because you need to make the lead feel like you understand them and like you worked with similar people before that had the same issues, which they overcame by using your solution. Now, if your lead isn't enthusiastic about this, just ask this simple question that you can see over here, which is, based on what you heard, is there anything that doesn't sound right about our service? And this will help you to qualify the lead. And once again, if you are unsure how to qualify leads or what lead qualification even is, guess what? Luckily for you, I'll probably do another video like this, but about lead qualifications, so do check it on the channel. And next up, after that, after you basically explain the product, in most cases, it'll be about handling objections and answering questions. In most cases, sales teams will have some sort of FAQ page where you basically have a list of questions and a list of answers. And I would really recommend, if you don't have one already, to create that. So at that moment in time, as soon as you explain the service to them, you would say something like this. Okay, Mark, let me pause here for a second. Do you have any questions? At that moment in time, they'll probably ask you a couple of questions about your fees, about your geographical coverage, like whatever, like unique selling points, how you're different to competitors. All of those basic questions you really, really need to be able to have answers to. Now, secondly, after that, as soon as you answer a couple of questions, you'll say, okay, based on what you heard, do you have any concerns with how we tackle this specific solution to your pain point? So, like, do you have any questions about how our payment gateway helps you to streamline cross-border payments for your company? Do you have any concerns with how we do it? So, for example, a lot of the time they will ask you about compliance to certain regulations or some other niche questions. Now, if you do hear some objections, we do have an objection handling guide, which once again, you can probably download somewhere. If you just type in B2B boosted objection handling, you will probably find it in Google somewhere. And on top of that, I'll do a separate video on handling objections. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. But the idea is simple. You need to be empathetic. The first thing in most cases you would have to do is label the emotions. So you'll say, okay, I hear you. I understand. It could be tedious with this specific thing. And then you go on to handle objections. And once again, we'll talk about that in a separate video. Now, this brings us very nicely to reinforcing the next steps. Worth noting that, yes, this is a backbone, this is a sales script, but you can absolutely adapt it to your specific way of selling. So by no means am I saying just read out these magic words, but just adapt it to your specific needs, right? So what I like to say when you reinforce the next steps is something like this. Mark, conscious of time, we've been on the call for 20 minutes now. I want to map out the next steps. For that, I need you to be honest with me. What are you thinking? Typically, it's either yes, you're interested in learning more, in which case I'll share a bit more information. I'll schedule a follow-up for this coming Thursday, and I'll pencil in a meeting in 2 weeks' time, so we can jump on a call with yourself, and you can also get your team to get involved with that to see if it's a good fit for you, or you say no and we just part ways. Now, based on what you heard here, do you think we've got a solution to the specific challenges that you mentioned with X and Y? Typically, after you say something like this, the only bit of resistance that you can hear is that they would like to get some more information. And in that case, you can just say, okay, cool, I'll just move this event 2 weeks from now to the same day, to the same time. I'm sure you don't really have an event or like something in your calendar for that exact time already, because hardly anyone is booked 2 weeks in advance. And at that moment in time, most people just say, yeah, sure, that's fine. And then you tell them, I'll also check in like 2-3 days time just to make sure you got the information, that you're happy with everything. And then you just follow up with a really cool email saying, hey, this is a recap of the challenges, this is a recap of the solutions, and here is how to do about it. Now, on top of that, if interested, you could, if the prospect is interested, this is something you can add to that as well. So you can say, assuming I send you the information by the end of the day today, when can I expect a reply from you? So that question works really well, because a lot of the time you can then pencil in a reminder in your CRM for that exact time to follow up. And that's something that's super useful. Or secondly, as well, you can say, oh, do you mind if I give you a nudge if I don't hear from you within a week of sharing the information? And in most cases, that will work really well. Now, if you're selling B2B, the chances are the prospects that you're speaking to will have a LinkedIn profile. So I would recommend, as a best practice, straight after the call, to connect with them on LinkedIn, because that will open up another channel to actually follow up with a lead. And straight away, you can drop them a connection request on LinkedIn and say, hey, great to chat to you. And once again, if you have a good-looking LinkedIn profile, a lot of the time they'll be like, whoa, okay, this guy means business. He is not only a good talker, they have a pretty good product. And now I have his LinkedIn profile. So once again, now you have 2 avenues to follow up with them. Or if you're in B2C sales, a lot of the time, you could ask for their WhatsApp number. And once again, I think it depends on the culture, really, and it depends on the kind of conversation dynamics that you have with the prospects. But I found with some of our clients now, they literally exchange WhatsApp numbers, and for them, that's a way of like securing the next steps as well. So whatever works for you, works for you. And on top of that, something that Alex Hormozi recommends is saying this exact phrase, which I saw in a lot of his YouTube shorts. But once again, I don't really know how effective it is, but I'll just share it with you. And he recommends saying something like, oh, are you against moving forward? And this would definitely put the prospects on the defensive, and they will try and reassure you that, of course, we're keen to move forward. And according to him, it's something that works 90% of the time when you're trying to overcome when you're really trying to secure the next steps. So once again, if you're stuck and you're unsure what the prospect thinks, just say, oh, are you against moving forward? Because a lot of the time, they'll try and reassure you that, no, you didn't just waste half an hour of your time before them rejecting you. So in a nutshell, that is the exact script that we've just covered for Alex Hormozi's closer framework. If you're interested in getting a copy yourself of a sales script, which basically explains it to you step by step, first of all, and then secondly, you can literally clone it into Google Docs, and you can then change the wording to suit your business. You can grab both of those. The links will be in the description, or they will be somewhere on the YouTube channel. So I think, if worst case, you would be able to just message me on LinkedIn or in the comments down below, and I'll make sure to reply to you with the sales scripts. Both this one, which explains how it works, and then finally the actual Google Docs, which you can just copy and paste, which should be a very easy copy and paste win, which you can see right here. And then the sales script, which you can see right here in this fancy sales pitch as well. Now, if you have any questions up to this point, do let me know. Other than that, please like the video if you watched this far, because right now we're at a stage at which I'm getting 5 likes a video. It's quite depressing, so bear with me. And if you like this video, I might even send you this sales script as soon as you request it. All the best in the meantime. Cheers, over and out.